Bye-bye. Hello and happy Monday, everyone, or happy whatever day it is you happen to be watching. This week, I wanted to try something a little different. We've had a whole bunch of rain, and right now, I don't know if you can hear it behind me, we have a bit of a windstorm going on. So I haven't done any outside projects at all, even though there are quite a few that could be happening. So the new thing we're going to try is we're going to make dinner and some bread. So hope you enjoy. Let's go. Bread normally takes longer because there are two different steps where you have to let it rise. So we're going to go ahead and start with that. I love making my own bread. It's easy and cheaper than a lot of people realize. It also takes me down memory lane when I would make bread with my mom when I was a kid. I like to set out all of my ingredients before starting. This practice serves two purposes. One, it makes it easier for me to clean up as I go through and put ingredients away when I'm done with them. And two, it helps me see what I'm running out of or to make sure I have everything that I need from the very beginning. The recipe I normally use is Betty Crocker's white bread recipe. I have found that it works well with white whole wheat flour, which is what I'm using today. It stays the same consistency, unlike whole wheat flours where you have to add more moisture. So if you wanted a more whole wheat option of a white bread, the white whole wheat flour does really well. I am a former baker at a local grocery store, so I've got a couple tips for you that you might find helpful when making bread. If you store your yeast in the fridge, pull it out and measure it onto a small plate so it sits in a thin layer before you start anything else. Yeast works best when it's not cold, and by spreading it out on a plate, this gives more surface area to warm it up to room temperature faster. Also make sure that you don't add your yeast directly on top of your salt. I've noticed from personal experience that this can slow down the rising process in your bread. I normally add salt into my bowl first, then a couple cups of flour, sugar, lard or shortening, and then the yeast after that. Start with a couple cups of flour instead of adding it all at once. Most recipes call for 3 to 3.5 cups at the start, and mix that with all the rest of your other dry ingredients and then add warm water. Then as you're mixing, add a cup of flour at a time until your dough is smooth and springy under your finger and doesn't stick to your hands when you touch it. A lot of recipes will call for you to let your dough rise in a lightly greased bowl. I let mine rise directly in the bowl I mixed everything in without the grease. There's no need really, at least not for this recipe. You can see here that I'm shaping my dough into a ball. I do this because of an old bakery habit and also because it lets me feel the consistency of the dough in case it didn't get kneaded long enough. When it's getting close to the end of the first rising time, I prepare my bread pans. I use shortening to grease both my pans and my counter for rolling out the dough, but you can also use butter or cooking spray. Now that the pans are ready, it is time to get the bread rolled out and shaped. First I checked my dough to make sure it had risen at least double in size, and once it was done, just gently press down and let the air out. And this is when I realized I forgot to grease my counter, so I had to do that, of course. This recipe makes 2 loaves, so what we're going to do is we're going to roughly cut it into 2 sections and then roll them each out into rectangles. I believe this recipe calls for both ends to be rolled into 9 by 13 inch rectangles, but I don't normally measure them. Bread dough like this is incredibly forgiving and doesn't need to be beautiful because we're just going to be using it for sandwiches. So as long as it is roughly close to what the recipe calls for, it's good enough for me. Once we roll the dough into a nice loaf, I pinch the ends, tuck them under, and it is time to repeat the process with the other half of the dough. Now I'm going to set up each loaf in its own pan for the second rising step and tuck them into bed under a damp paper towel. After this second rising step, they're ready to go in the oven. Goodbye. The bread is done. It's time to set these loaves aside to cool and get started on the main course. Another little trick for you. If you tap or flick the top of your loaf and it sounds hollow, it's probably done. Before anyone asks, no, this is not one of my birds. While the breeds I have are used for both meat and eggs, I haven't actually butchered any of my own animals yet. And for a recipe like this, I would personally prefer to use a faster growing breed, specifically for meat. After rinsing and patting the bird dry, I'm just going to mix up a blend of spices to cover it with. This was a mix of random spices I had little bits of here and there, as well as some salt and pepper. I was super happy with the flavor of the mix in both the roast and when I used the bones and leftovers to make broth, so I'm definitely going to be using it again in the future. I just sprinkled over the top, make sure to rub it into the skin. I did it all over the bottom of the bird as well as inside the cavity, just to make sure that it got as much seasoning as possible, and I just used all the rest of those spices that I had. I found that I really enjoy roasting in cast iron pans. They are so easy to transfer from the stovetop to the oven, and everything cooks really nicely and evenly in these pans. I would definitely suggest them for anyone who's interested, and they're a great way to be more sustainable because they're not going to go bad, basically. You just have to know how to take care of them. I normally put the chicken in for about 45 minutes, and then after that, if it needs more time, I will put it in for another 5 to 10 minutes until the internal temperature reaches a minimum of 165 degrees Fahrenheit. A good place to check the temperature is in the thigh. I also like to check in the breast as well, just making sure that I'm not poking through the cavity, because that will be a different read than the actual meat itself. And once I'm happy with the temperature, it's time for dinner. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you like what you saw, let me know. You can check out more on my Instagram, my blog, TikTok, and I'll see you all next week. Bye.